if you're arguing with your significant other, chances are you're not going to come to that place. You're not going to come to that place where there's no war. So you have to actively work to love someone at the same time. To make love last over a long period of time, it has to be a choice.
Brian, welcome back to Spearlift.
Thank you, Devin.
It's a pleasure to have you here again. And today on Spearlift, we'll be speaking with Brian Murphy of the importance of the nuclear family, loyalty, and the unique love between family members. But before we get started, please, viewers, subscribe, like, and share the content of this episode, as it greatly helps to support the channel and expand our reach to more people on these very important topics. Brian, let us start by me listening to a few important statistics that I gathered. Firstly, according to Pew Research, the percentage of nuclear families estimated in the United States was 73% in 1960, which that percentage has now decreased approximately to 45%. Secondly, according to the National Women's Law Center review statistic, 36% of female-headed families live in poverty, and 22% of single male-headed counterparts were in poverty. And finally, only approximately 7% of married couples with children live in poverty. Okay, and again, these are all estimates, approximations. Okay, but just to give a sort of frame of reference here. Okay, so to start off, Brian, please describe to our viewers a bit about your family and what the importance of family means to you personally.
Okay, well, my family isn't exactly the traditional family. I did have a previous marriage, and I had 2 children in that marriage. I have a 13-year-old girl, 11-year-old boy, a 6-year-old boy, and a almost 2-year-old girl. But the 13 and 11-year-old are from my previous marriage. And then my 6-year-old and my almost 2-year-old are from this marriage. So, but as far as being a nuclear family, I mean, really the key is just surrounding them with love and, showing 2 people working in partnership, I think, is the key. As long as you do have someone that wants to partner with you on the same level, it makes raising a family and, raising kids a lot easier. The stress, especially when it feels like you're on your own, is a lot more than when you have support, just naturally. So, I think it vibes right with those statistics that if you just have a single mom or just a single father without someone to help, things are worse. Outcomes are typically worse. It doesn't mean that there's no way that you can make it out, but just things are harder for you. At the same time, sometimes adversity does breed good things, but nobody wants adversity for their kids. I mean, everybody, for the most part, no matter what country, what language, everybody wants the best for their children. So I think it makes it a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier when you have support. Now, some people, they may not find it from a spouse, but they may have, grandparents that are there to help. And, it can be maybe not necessarily a nuclear family structure, but it can be a supportive family structure nonetheless. So I think, the key is really support. Nuclear has many different meanings, but, the divorce rate is higher in this country, and it has crept up, especially since the 1960s. But it doesn't have to mean that all children, are going to be worse off. It just means that, people have had to adjust given the new environment. And, adaptability is especially important in these days. So
Brian, how do you gain support, or how do you achieve support between you and a spouse in a nuclear family? Is to say, or sorry, it doesn't even have to be, let's say, because let me frame it this way, because there's a lot of families that are between a male female. There's a lot of also homosexual couples that have kids as well.
Yes.
There's what you said as well. Maybe the single mom, single dad who gets a lot more support from grandparents. There's all different types of families, okay? That
yes.
Kids, all right? And they're all acceptable. And I think, and you may agree, that as long as there's love and there's respect and mutual support, making sure that a kid can, be raised in a way that is happy and feels that love, that's the most important thing. So whatever type of family it is that raises children, whatever backgrounds they come from, okay, and whatever diversity they may have, how do you achieve actual support between the people you want to raise your kids with, because sometimes that might be hard. Like, what I mean by that is, for example, like, let's just say because I don't have kids, so I have no idea, how this is. I mean, I have enough responsibility taking care of our dog, and she's a lot of work, So, but I mean, I can't even compare it. I know, but I'm just being facetious here. But what I'm trying to get at is, when I look at a day-to-day scenario of how life is between people, and especially if more than one person live in a household together, in a home, there's only so much time in a day that you can dedicate to certain things. And knowing families that I do, I mean, it seems like the time dedicated to children and attention is so much more,
it truly is.
And so how do you get that support, that buy-in between whoever it is that you're raising kids with to really continue, let's say, balancing your mutual love and respect between each other and not tearing each other's hair out, and also giving the proper attention to the children and giving the proper attention to yourself? How do you do that?
Well, I think that's key right there, is knowing the right qualities to look for, especially if you're in that single parent stage. I mean, that's tough, after my situation, when I was divorced, it's not always the easiest finding love when you're a single parent and trying to take care of two kids and work full time and keep yourself afloat and, get things better in your situation. And at the same time, trying to find someone is not always easy. So when you do decide to find someone, or, you do start looking for someone, knowing the right qualities to look for is key. And part of it's tough because, people aren't just going to come out front in the dating world and tell you, I respond very badly to stress, please don't be around me if I'm angry. People just don't reveal their true self until a certain point in a relationship. Some people that may be fairly early, some people that may be years, some people maybe never reveal their true self. They always have a certain part of them that they keep to themselves. But everybody's kind of different. But I think what I'm getting at is you have to look for somebody that can respond very well to stress. So in a certain situation, especially if you're in a single parent situation looking for somebody, you definitely have to look for somebody who either has kids or is very, very responsive and empathetic and understanding of kids. If your first instinct is to be understanding, that reveals a lot about who you're going to be later on. You know, if the kid spills something, or if the kid, you know, knocks something over or breaks something, how is that other person responding? Now, in the course of a long relationship, or, you know, if you've been together, you know, since the beginning with the kid, those situations definitely present themselves differently throughout time, depending on the age, depending on how much the kid can reach, the level of destruction that the child is capable of. Sometimes it depends on the level of stress and frustration you have to deal with. But just in general, I mean, the younger the kid is, usually the more demands they have on you. So people right now with very young kids, people with babies, they're in tough positions. People with, my youngest is almost 2 here. And, you know, being in that position, she's just starting to develop some of the terrible 2 attitude level. You know, you start to see some of that come up when she doesn't get what she wants. And that can get very frustrating and stressful at times. But that's where having a partner who has the right qualities, tries to de-escalate situations, tries to be understanding, tries to calm everybody down. And if your partner isn't the one doing that stuff, then you have to be the one doing that stuff. I mean, a lot of it does come down to balance too. For example, I would not be organized if I'm not forced to be. So I don't like to have a pre-planned list of things to do that day necessarily. I mean, it's not that I always avoid it for work. I usually do have a schedule to follow, but just in general, I'm not a big fan of scheduling everything and planning everything. I do like some things to just kind of go as, you know, as they go.
That's where we're very different.
And my wife, Stephanie, is not that way. She likes to plan, and she would be much more understanding of lists. You know, she makes me grocery lists and supply lists of things we need. So she would be much more understanding of a more organizational minded person. So, you know, having strengths that balance each other out is definitely a good thing too. If you get somebody who's exactly like you, if you're both making lists, well, what happens if your list doesn't get done and hers does? Then somebody's always constantly, the give and take is always an extra level there. But if you do have somebody who, you know, kind of counterbalances you, it can help create, you know, a better flow and give you the other side of things. Typically in arguments, I like to be the devil's advocate. And while that may irritate my wife a little bit, she understands because it gives her the other side. And, you know, same way with me. If you're giving me the other side, I'm usually going to appreciate that, because, you know, sometimes it's easy to get into our own mindsets and into our own level of understanding. And then, you know, someone else has a completely different view of the situation that you would never know unless you listened or, you know, cared to know. So
very interesting.
So yeah, being, you know, caring to know and caring to where the other person's at is very important too.
Now, how difficult is it when, let's say, because you raise an important point, that it's important who you know and how you know that person when you raise kids, like let's say your partner, whoever it is, okay? Or, you know, whoever's being supported in that joint effort to raise the children. I mean,
yes,
like honestly, it can take a lifetime to know anybody. I mean, my wife is still finding out things about me after 10 years, and she's scared and running to the hills, you know? So, I mean, how do you see it in that way? Like, let's say, okay, you know, hypothetically, if sometimes couples or, you know, a relationship reveals itself where they, you know, there is a kid, okay, presented very early in a relationship, and the couple don't know each other well, I've seen situations where it can really bond them together and make that relationship really manifest and grow into something really deep and loving, and other situations where it really doesn't. It ruins it. So
Yeah.
how do you see that situation with that kind of buy-in to raise kids?
It's a tough situation when it's unplanned. I mean, almost no matter what situation you're in, you would prefer to have a plan for something as large as bringing another human being into this world. That's optimal, I think, no matter what situation you're in, is that you have things, ready to go beforehand. But we're imperfect beings, and we sometimes make our own plans that have nothing to do with what we originally intended. I had my first daughter very young, very early into the relationship, just within 3 months of of being together, actually. So then when the pregnancy is announced and it's a real thing, it's easy to have pressure. Society puts a lot of pressure on you to make it work. Maybe not as much anymore as it used to, but still, there's definitely going to be pressures out there, whether it's family, that want maybe a traditional family system for the child. Maybe it's, just other people's judgment. But ultimately, a lesson that I learned is you have to trust, what's in your heart. You have to trust your own instincts. Because if you make a decision for someone other than yourself, chances are one day you'll end up regretting that decision because you aren't the one that made it. So just as a general principle in things, even more so in this case, if you commit yourself too early, which a lot of people do, things might not work out because you don't truly know the person. But on the other hand, it's truly hard to say what's right for some people isn't necessarily what's right for others. If me and my wife now would have been in that same position, I don't think it would have changed where we're at now in our relationship, honestly. So, but not everyone can say that, and not every situation is the same. So it does take a while to truly know somebody, but there's certain things, your instincts, your gut, whatever you want to call it, your heart, you do have to rely on that to a certain extent. Sometimes it may steer you the wrong way, but normally it's your mind and your pride that's telling you something against what your instincts are telling you. So, trust your instincts, you'll be better off.
Absolutely. Brian, how rewarding is it to you, and from your own experience of raising your family, to create a unique sense of bonding and love between each other? Let's say, explain that dynamic between you and your wife, and over time developing and knowing and understand the individuality of your own kids. How does that unique sort of creation between you and your family feel for you, and how special is that?
Well, I think just in general, humans typically want to be loved. It's a natural human desire to have somebody else care about you in the same way that you care about them. That's why one of the worst things is unrequited love. But at least, in my case, I truly felt the love very, very quickly. It did not take me long with my wife to know that I had found something real. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard because some people, are better than others at hiding who they are. And sometimes we tell ourselves what we want to hear in a certain situation. But if you truly examine the person, if you look them in the eyes and let each other see into your soul, get out the deepest parts of you, things that you never told anybody. You know, sharing things, sharing personal things with each other is one way to connect with your significant other. With your children, it's on another level. Truly knowing that you created this child, you know, you brought this person into the world. It's huge. It's a huge thing. So when you look at each kid, each one has their own uniqueness. Each one, you have your own story. You have your own story with, and you can love them in their own way, because in the same way that you and me are different, in the same way that you and any random person that you're going to meet on the street are going to be different, at least in certain ways. Every child is different in certain ways. They'll have parts of you, they'll have parts of the other. If they're adopted, then, you know, they'll develop parts of you and they'll develop parts of the other. You know, because it's not just it's not just nature and nurture. It's definitely both. Your personality is somewhat determined by your genes, but it's also determined by the level of support and love in your life. You know, typically people that don't have that love, and if you can't have that emotional connection with your children, they're lacking something, and you're lacking something. So there will be other things that'll try to fill the void, and they'll never fill the void. In the same way that finding another partner, whether, you know, it be of the same sex, of a different sex, of you know, just somebody that you really connect with, you know, even in a non-sexual way, but someone that, you know, best friend, or, you know, somebody that understands you too. All of that is necessary for us to find in this world. So if we can't be that for our children, someone else needs to, you know, someone else needs to step up. But ultimately, it's up to the parent usually to be that one. And it's also up to the husband or to the wife. You know, even in an argument, is winning really that important? I mean, look at it like this. Chances are, if you're the man, typically men, you know, care a lot about winning and are more competitive in a lot of things, but there's also a lot of women that are very competitive in everything as well and don't want to lose. But in an argument, no one wins. You know, same thing if you want to look at it like a war. There's losses on both sides. So if you're arguing with your significant other, chances are you're not going to come to that place. You're not going to come to that place where there's no war. So you have to actively work to love someone at the same time. You know, to make love last over a long period of time, it has to be a choice. In the same way that everything has to be a choice. The more choices that you're actively making, the better off you are. So, and that's an important point you're making, but does, like, especially love between you and your partner have to, like, just be kind of this fairy tale love, or a natural love? Or, I mean, just for the sake of being with keeping the children intact and having them grow, right? If you both agree on that, should it be a forced love? What should it be in that way, you know? Like, let's say that the couple's being torn apart for different reasons, but they want to stay together for the kids, so to speak. What do you recommend in that situation? Now that's a situation that I personally grappled with many times in my life. If, you know, being raised the way that I was, that, you know, if you have a kid together, then you're married, and once you're married, that's, you know, final. there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You're in that no matter what happens. And, you know, I would say overall, if the only reason that you're in it is for the kids, then you're both in it for the wrong reasons, because the kids are usually negatively affected by neither parent being happy. You know, things are always going to be harder for children of divorced parents. So it's not a choice that anyone should take lightly to divorce their spouse, no matter what the case may be. I mean, it should never be a choice you take lightly, especially if there's kids involved. But at the same time, you have to be fair to the kids too. Kids deserve happiness. They deserve to see their parents accomplish things. The more they see you do, kids copycat, from when they're babies. They copycat, da-da, and then eventually leading up to, them watching you brush your teeth, watching you clean the house, and then that's how they do it. People are very good at mimicking, especially children. So if you show children how to love, if you show children how to treat each other with respect, and if you show children that sometimes you do have to make tough choices and you have to make tough decisions in your life, and you can't you can't be forever frozen. Sometimes you do have to make a decision. If you're both miserable in the relationship, your kids are miserable, you're miserable, everyone else around you, both sets of friends are miserable. If you're trying to make an argument in that situation that it's better for the kids to have everyone around them in their life be miserable, that's a tough argument to make. So, but as far as your real question, the active love or if it's forced or whatever, I mean, love definitely has to be a choice. It's a feeling too. And different times it may crop up more than others in the feeling sense. If you look your significant other in the eye and you have that connection and you feel something deep inside, that's that, fairy tale love that we're taught, where you feel something in your heart. That's real. It exists, but it's never eternal. It's never just going to stick on. That switch never stays on where that feeling goes on forever. Because if it did, would anybody ever break up? Would any relationships that had that spark where they both felt that love, would it ever end? I don't think it would, if it was a forever feeling. So there are times, and you have to grow together. One of my good friends is older, and he's been married to his wife for almost 40 years. And he said, through the last 40 years, he's seen, basically 5 different women, from when he first started dating his wife when they were teenagers. And then as she got older, she had children. She's, gone through the later stages in her life. So she's been, almost a different, 5 different people in different ways throughout the course of her life. And so is he. And so, you've been together 10 years. You've had that first, round, let's say. And then for the next 10 years, you may be a different person. She may be a slightly different person. But, if you love that person, if you make an active choice to love that person and care about them and be there for them, then as they change and as they grow over time, you're going to want to be there with them. And it's not going to be a surprise when one day, they're at a new place in life. It's a partnership. Communication, you have to constantly be talking. And it's hard. Right now, my wife works all day. I'm usually working all day. The kids are at daycare. We have a few hours at night to talk. But in that few hours at night that we have to talk, that's when, you get everything out that hey, this happens today. Oh, I was feeling like this earlier, you make the most of the time that you have, no matter how big or little it is. So it has to be a constant. constant decision.
Yeah, and it's a really important point you're making, because I think in that sense of what you're describing, of this sort of partnership, whatever form it comes in, between people staying together for a long duration of time, it's the sense of that love is not so much of the, let's call it, I don't know, the initial, first days, months that you're with that person, that infatuation, this very hormonal drive of attraction. I mean, that's always still there and percolates in its own way throughout the whole duration of your relationship, but it becomes a different sort of evolution. It's the bond itself becomes something more intrinsically important and deep, I feel, based on how you revelated from that and how I feel in my own relationship. And I've told my wife this in different times throughout our relationship, that, every day I'm with her, I feel more in love with her, even though we may have said and done the worst things to each other the day before. There's some thread of unconditionality that seems to perpetuate itself over a course of time, and
That's true.
And I think, I don't know what that is, but it's really deep. And if I think, no matter what you go through with somebody that you decide to be with, that is a very unique thing in life itself, apart from just the family itself, between you and that partner. So
true.
Brian, I have a really sort of because we're talking about this whole idea of bond and relationship and just keeping the glue together, so to speak, in a way. Let's, and I would never wish this on anybody, of course, but let's just say, going back to what you were saying, when the children are very young and they're developing, they're growing up, they mimic and copy a lot of what you do to learn, How, and I don't wish this, this is not a precursor to wish anything upon you later in life or anything like that, so just please don't misinterpret it. But let's just say they get to a stage in their life where, my dad is the worst person I ever met in my life, and he's so evil, and for their own reasons they decide that, whatever it is, because there are situations with people like that and families that, unfortunately, people turn on each other, and I don't wish that upon you or anyone ever. But my question to you, just coming from your perspective as a father and husband, how do you see that you would handle a situation like that, where for whatever reason, and a kid's own reason, that they decided to turn on their parent? How would you think your sense of unconditional love and kinship and just sensibility of being there for them no matter what would still remain?
I mean, to a certain degree, that should always remain. I mean, there's many dads out there who don't see their children as often as they would like to, because they're not with the mom, and children respond to that situation differently. Some cling on to a certain parent more than the other. Some, still try to be around both parents equally. Some, may think that it's necessary to take sides with one parent. And if you have a child who's taking a side with the other parent, you still will always love them unconditionally, and you still have to be understanding. You can't force someone to love you. Just no matter if you're the child, if you're the parent, if you're anything, you cannot force someone else to love you, because love is a voluntary thing. There may be involuntary hormones, involuntary reflexes, but love is a voluntary thing. It's a constant choice. So if one of your children is making that constant choice not to be there with you and not to talk to you, or whatever the case may be, it doesn't mean that you love them any less. And You know, I'm not necessarily a Bible, reader or a Christian or whatever, but the story of the prodigal son, I think to a certain extent, every child, no matter how bad they wrong their parents, there's always going to be a part of that parent that will be ready to, accept them with open arms. So, children are children. Their brains aren't fully developed. You definitely have to remember that. Even though they may have to grow older than their age, they may have to be wiser than their age when their parents are separated. Life may force them into that position, but at the end of the day, they're still just kids. So you cannot put more burden on them than you would for anyone else that's that age. In certain ways, you have to be understanding, whether the kid is turning their back on you, or whether the kid is right there, with their arms open for you. That's something that is universal.
I get that sense of unconditionality then, as you're saying, no matter what happens, as time goes on, like these people in your life, these relationships.
It's your child. Right. It's your child. There's serial killers that get back in touch with their parents, and their parents are there for them. I'm not saying in all cases, there's also some circumstances where maybe you wouldn't be friends, after a certain point. Maybe you would. There are some reconcilable things that could potentially happen, but that list is very short. We all have to grow in our own way. So forgiveness is key. Forgiveness is key to a good marriage. Forgiveness is key to a good parent, life as a parent. And it's also key to being a happy person. All of that baggage that you hold in, and hatred and anger at someone else or something else, you're holding at the end of the day, and it hurts you. So letting that anger, right? letting frustration, letting fear, letting all of it go is the most beneficial thing that you can do for yourself. And it's also the best way you can teach your children. Anxiety, depression, suicide, unfortunately, all these things are more and more common, are more and more rampant as the years go by, it seems like. And I feel like some people are taking the wrong mode. We do have to be there to support someone else. And sometimes being there to support someone else is just helping them get back up. If you're frustrated, if you're down, knowing that somebody cares about you is something that can help lift you up. No matter how small that may be, just try to be positive. The more positive you're putting out there, the better things are going to be for everyone around you and yourself.
Excellent point. I think that is just so incredibly important for, a lot of it kind of comes down to personal responsibility in a way. However, having a good network of, it doesn't have to be a network like hundreds of people. I mean, 1-2 people, that just really, know how to hit that part of you that really can lift you up. I mean, that's more than you need, and it's so important, especially in the year 2020 in which we're filming this video. And that leads me to my final question to you, Brian, as well. For all the families out there, as this is being filmed in 2020, what would be your best advice for families to, in the best way they possibly can, take care of their children in this year, especially with all the new stringent rules around the coronavirus and what we can and can't do in society?
Use the opportunity very well. I mean, it's a struggle. Things are more challenging than they've ever been before for parents. I say this as someone who didn't make the decision to do remote or in school or homeschool until basically the last possible day that they let us make the decision. There's many millions of parents in limbo about what to do for their kids right now, what to do with their kids right now. But at the same time, under most circumstances, a lot of us have more time with the kids too. Even if it's only for shorter periods of time, I mean, just more time overall with the kids. Time is something that you don't realize the value until you look back on it. So you just have to constantly be aware. Try to live in the moment with your kids. Kids aren't worrying about the bills. They're not worrying about who's going to make the car payment or, what stocks are going up or what's happening in the world of politics. Kids are worried about what's happening right now. Who's playing right now? Who's playing with who? What can I do? What's the next activity that I want to do? They're constantly moving, constantly living in the moment. So the more that you can do that with them, the more you can connect with them. And once you've connected with someone, you can spend time apart, but you'll always have that connection. So, even for parents who may be on the road, guys who drive trucks or, go to meetings across the country and are gone pretty regularly, the time that you do have, use it wisely. Use the opportunity that you have. These lives are ours. They're our responsibility as parents, but also beyond responsibility, I mean, it's truly our legacy. So if you look at parenthood like this is your legacy, this is what we are leaving behind, we're going to leave behind a much better world than the one that we currently have.
Excellent.
Much more well-adjusted kids. If you can make it through this, if you can be well-adjusted through this situation that's happening globally, still maintain your sanity, and still have a positive outlook for the future, you're well ahead of the curve. We're going to be a lot better off.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point because actually, us adults who are inundated with a lot of, this news of this year and everything that's going on every spectrum of current events, we're kind
hurricanes, shootings, there's everything.
We're in a much worse position than these kids, really. I mean, because as you said, they're not as exposed to what's going on and, unaware. And so, they're not worried about the extra 40 million things that we are all the time. So, it's not, apart from wearing the mask, that they, probably have to do, then they're not as, inundated by these things. So, Brian, thank you so much for this excellent conversation. And I think,
thank you.
Parents everywhere are going to really attune to your message. And I really thank you very much. And thank you for coming on again to another episode of Spearlift. And we will see you on the next episode and video, Spearlifters. Have a great day.